It
Hey
is time. We
everybody.
are back. It is Peppermint and Caswell, and we are here for another real world review. This is the finale. Remember, seven strangers picked to live in a loft, and they had their lives taped to see what would happen when people stop being polite and start getting real. And it all happened in this finale. There was some chills, some spills, some thrills, some tears, and some booze. And we're
There
gonna
were no
break it
thrills.
down. Lots of it. Well, shut up. We're going to break it down right now. This is the real review.
This is the true story. True story.
Of seven strangers picked to live in a loft.
And nearly 30 years later, talk about it.
And have their lives taped.
To find out what happens.
What?
When people stop being polite. Could you get the phone?
And start getting real.
The Real World with Peppermint.
Hey, y'all. It is Peppermint and Caswell. Hey, Caswell.
Hey, beautiful. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It is the week of the GLAAD Media Awards, and I was nominated yesterday.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
your nomination. I think
Thank
that's
you.
amazing.
I
Well
think it's amazing,
deserved.
too.
It's about
Thank
time.
It feels good to have some recognition, you know what I mean? Even if you don't win, you still have the opportunity to have your situation elevated a little bit. And so I was elevated a little bit. Watching
you
last
won.
night.
You won. Adam Lambert is scrambling.
Well, congratulations to all the winners. Last night, of course, by the time y'all see this, it would have already aired. So congratulations to the winners last night, whoever you are. And in the meantime, we're going to talk about what really gets me going. Something that really inspired me to even start in music, which sounds weird, is the real world. This is the real review. Caswell and I have been getting together all season to bring you our takes on the Real World Homecoming Season 1. And for those of you who don't know, the Real World is pretty much the quintessential, the first real reality TV show of the modern era. It started in 1992 on MTV, and they had seven folks living in a house and just basically taped Big Brother style. But a lot of y'all didn't even watch the first season, so I'm here to deliver the news that the first season was a transformative season. When we think of reality TV show today, we think of bikinis, we think of funny challenges, maybe trying to balance a ball on your head or having sex with somebody, in the back room or in the jacuzzi. But that's not what was going on in this real world house. They were having some real tough conversations. And it really seems kind of timely. So we're going to talk about the season finale right now. This is episode 6. If you haven't watched it, stop it because there will be some spoilers. We waited as long as we could, but we are going to talk about it. So here we go. Episode 6 starts with Kevin basically he's talking about how he wants to leave the house. He's talking with the producers and the roommates, and in an emotional recap, he actually says one thing that I think is really poignant. He says, could you imagine what would have happened if we had Twitter or Instagram or Facebook when people were being hanged, on trees? And I think that was really poignant kind of idea and thought, because we see all these videos coming out, seeming like they're coming out at least a couple times a year, if not a couple times a month, of folks being brutalized, murdered, and things like that. And so Kevin made that point. He wanted to let us know that after 3 episodes of the housemates running around being concerned about Becky's feelings, he was like, look, I have feelings too, and I've been affected by this over the past 30 years, just as much as you were, and just as much as she was. And he's talking about the argument that he had with Becky over race 30 years ago, what was rehashed this week. And so what do you think about him kind of, this is just in that moment when the roommates are, okay, enough with this conversation, let's just get drunk. But he does take a moment to kind of express that. And this is the first time I've ever seen Kevin cry. So what were your thoughts? What was your reaction to that?
Well, the first thing I thought was that, if they had Twitter and Facebook and Instagram back when black people were being hung from trees, black people wouldn't have been allowed to have Twitter.
I mean, honestly, Yeah, they would have figured out a way for us not to have it.
Yeah, and then there would have been a secret way, like they would have had some like white person avatar so that they could like sneak on and see what was happening. So yeah, they would have had to like crack the code to figure out how to sneak on to Twitter. So um, I'm glad that Becky is like it seems like every episode since Becky got Karenitis on everybody that they seem to resolve the Becky issue. I can understand how it kind of never goes away since she's supposed to be there, and now it's only 5 people in the house with Eric in a hotel. So it seems like they finally came to terms with like, okay, this is who the bitch is. She ain't changing, and I kind of feel like the saddest thing about it was that the hope of the real world was that if these 7 people that come from, different perspectives can get together and solve a problem, that could be, a reflection on how we could solve problems in the real world, like or outside of that apartment. So the fact that Becky left and refused to take responsibility was completely emblematic of how Karen's act in real life, and made me feel like, well, I guess we're never really going to solve racism, or white people are obviously the people that have to solve racism since they invented it. So it seems that a lot of white people, specifically, I guess we're using Karen's as an example right now, which is at least that mentality is a really good way to look at it, is that people with the Karen mentality aren't willing to be introspective and see where they could have gone wrong or how they can go right. So unfortunately, the most interesting thing about the real world comeback after 29 years is the situation with Becky, and it was very reflective of where we are right now rather than like solving the problem.
Kevin does mention, and I think it's ironic that some people may have like fatigue from watching like this episode or this season because of like, oh, this is like this subject, it doesn't go away. But I just think that is a microcosm for how many Black folks have felt 10 years ago, not even in the last year, about racism and about like the effects of racism on us, on everyone. And it's like, it's this weird thing of like, feeling victimized by something or someone in that moment, but also understanding that the only way to get that victimization or that pain to stop is to gently educate the person that's hurting you so that they will eventually understand how they should be a better person. And that's like the weird balance that a lot of people have who are victims of crimes that are racially motivated have to do. Right now, AAPI, folks of Asian descent in our country, along with other folks, but specifically folks of Asian descent, are taking their own initiative to speak out on why it's wrong. These racial attacks against Asian folks are wrong, and then they are the ones who are graciously guiding us through why and how we need to be, and it just seems like, gosh, we have to be in a different place. You know what I mean? But my point is that Kevin takes the time to say that, as a Black person who's been talking about this for so long, and he's built his life's work around it, that even he's exhausted, and he knows that other Black folks are exhausted talking about this subject. And Eric offers up that everyone is actually suffering, and that we don't know other people's trauma, basically. And I think that's a really wise thing. I'm just really pleased with where Eric has kind of transformed to. Because back in the day, he was this party boy, which was fine by me. But now he is, at first I thought, this is just lip service. Like, who's he trying to fool with this, like, sort of Gandhi-esque act, with all these platitudes and like, speaking so sanctimoniously, but that's not what he's doing at all. I think he's being really genuine, Eric, and I believe that I believe him when he talks about his spirituality and the connection that he wants to have with everybody. What do you think about Eric's?
Well, I don't know if I don't know how much you've been paying attention to Eric, but it seems real to me, and it also seems like a natural progression because there are steps along the way which we were able to kind of stay in touch with Eric. Like there was a real world versus road rules thing that came out a long time ago. That was like the first real world, and I saw him like definitely mature since then. He was still looking good, and then there was an other reality TV show that came on back in the beginning of competitive reality TV series and dramatic reality TV series, in which it was all quote unquote has been guys that came together.
Was he on that?
Yeah, he was on that. And I remember on the first episode, they had a fake press junket in which they had to answer all these hard questions about stuff. And then there was another one where they jumped on stage and they heard the sound of like cheering applause, and they get on stage and there's no one there and it's actually crickets. It was like this realization like, hey, you're a nobody. And it was like kind of humiliating. And I saw him go through a growth with that when he was in that place too. So I feel like every time I've gotten a little sneak peek into where Eric is at currently over the years, he seemed to be going through like getting to like this spiritual plateau. So it didn't seem far-fetched to me. I feel like a couple years ago, or maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I saw something he was on, and he was doing a lot of talk about meditation and stuff. So it seems like he's in the right place, and I think it seems very genuine to me.
I can feel that. You know, you may have seen this coming. I didn't get a chance to watch Eric over the past few years. I'm not saying that he came off like it seemed like he was just reverting to some fake thing, but it is a contrast. And there are a lot of people, I guess my real point is not so much I needed to see Eric in the long run to know. I guess my point is you didn't need to watch that reality show to see him take his steps over the past several years. To see, you could have just met him on this show today and see he's being genuine. But I'm just saying the two ideas were, it's the last person that I would have expected in the house. If you'd asked me 30 years ago who's going to be the spiritual leader, I wouldn't have guessed Eric. But I'm happy that he's come where he has. I think it's fantastic. I'm sure he's coming a lot.
I think that Kevin has gone in a somewhat similar direction too, just as far as being introspective and not like applying his energy in a different way, as opposed to well, I can't really explain it, but he's certainly not coming across like the angry black man that he was accused of being back in 1992. He seems to have very hyper aware of the full picture and exactly why it's happening. So it seems to be like he stepped away from like the blame game, as opposed to, okay, how do we solve this problem and look at it as a whole? Do you know what I mean? And at the same time, I can tell he's still really tired of trying to like explain to white people that it's like we're all wrapped up in this system in which racism plays a part on literally everything that we do, and black people can see it because they can feel it with everything they do, whether it's getting a loan for a house or moving into the neighborhood they want to, or getting the job that they want to get to, or the school that they want to get into, or getting pulled over by cops 10 times more, or how they're treated by cops as opposed to white people. And white people are only seeing quote unquote proof of it now. I mean, I'm saying quote unquote because some white people don't even see it as proof, just because of social media and how with everyone with their cell phones, and black people getting shot just from while sitting in their car. So I don't know. I think that Kevin is exhausted, but he's made the obvious points, and I think that black people, at the most part, know that this is kind of like out of our hands. Like, what else do you need from us? Especially with the trial that's going on right now.
The Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd.
The footage of George Floyd, having his neck kneed for over 8 minutes. It's like, what else do you need? So it's like, we're giving you this like gift of being able to be introspective and seeing what you can do differently. And Becky still hasn't even taken that gift and used it and be like, oh, I can actually make this change. So she seems to really symbolize where so many white people are stuck in this, well, I'm not racist. Well, I took a dance class with a bunch of black people, and we were all one. And that I don't see color mentality, which is so fucked up and not helping.
One of the things that I think is really interesting is we mentioned, okay, so a lot of the roommates have evolved, but Andre clearly hasn't evolved in the way of technology. This is the second time in a row that Andre has like done something so weird and like messed up the situation with the tech. And so last time he got caught bad mouthing Becky on camera and didn't realize it. And this time he tries to make this video, which is actually pretty cool. He sits and makes a selfie video of him talking about the house, how much he loves it, how much he's going to miss it. And then he presses the record button, I guess the stop button, and realizes that, oh my God, he actually hadn't been recording. And he started recording when he thought he was pressing stop. And so then it started recording and he was like, oh, that didn't record. And then you see the ceiling.
Come on, Dad.
Is a true dad. He's a dad, isn't he? So the roommates are sitting down to reminisce when they broke into the control room, which was the last episode of the finale of the first season, when they broke into the control room and they basically turned the cameras. They went in and they took the cameras, they took control of everything, and they started filming the show on the producers and the directors. That's what happened 29 years ago. And so just then, when they're reminiscing about all that, they hear a knock at the door, and it's a surprise visit from John Murray from the producers of the show and the original co-creators of the show. And they have a chance to sit down and just have a conversation about what they created and where they've come. And the two producers, they actually have the chance to ask the two producers if it turned out the way that they expected, that this season of Real World Homecoming turned out the way that they expected. And then they also had the opportunity to ask if they wish that a certain storyline that never aired originally had actually aired. And to that, Heather replied, really graciously, that she expresses regret that the show never actually aired or depicted the relationship that she had with her father. Heather had a really close relationship and bond with her father, which apparently her father was around the house a lot, had come to the tapings of the show, but that was all edited out. And her father passed away a couple of years ago. I do remember hearing that. And so, what do you think? Do you think that she says that they weren't ready, that she knows that they weren't ready, and she accepts that it's not something that they wanted to show. But she, in a kind of an emotional way, says that she wants whoever's going to produce the show again or the next show, if there's an opportunity for them to depict the relationship of a black woman and her father, don't edit that out because it's really crucial to the future of black women, basically. What do you think about her plea? Do you agree with that? Do you think that's something that is it just like, everybody has a father, everyone has a father, whether they have a dad or a father figure, that's a different story. But do you think that's something that the world needs to see?
I thought that was probably the most touching moment of all 6 episodes, to be honest with you. And just like to see how important it was to her, not only because how much she loved her dad, that she had a really tight relationship with her dad, and she looked up to her dad because he was a hard worker and just really fueled her fire with, all the hard work that she was going to have to do being an entertainer. I think that there's such a stereotype of black dads leaving the family and black girls not having a father figure or someone to really look up to, as far as someone that would symbolize the man that they should be looking to have in their own relationships when they grow up as an adult. So it almost seemed like, of course he should have been in there, and I don't know. I don't know. I feel like maybe you can talk about the effect that it has on you as far as maybe the relationship with your father, or are there black women that didn't grow up with strong dads in the household and how that has an effect on them. But I also feel like so many black girls that don't have representation of father-daughter relationships in media, they almost feel like, well, they don't deserve it because they never get it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. You could probably expand on that a lot more than I could, but it made a lot of sense to me what she was requesting.
I definitely think it made sense, and I do think it's important. I think it's important that we show strong relationships between fathers and their daughters for a multitude of reasons, but obviously because it'll shape how women, if anything, it'll shape how women view themselves and value themselves in the eyes of men when they go out into the world. And that is something that I think people get. I think people get that there's a special bond between a father and his daughter. But that's always depicted very, honestly, it's we've seen it. We see it in white television shows that daddy's little girl, what comes to mind is a white girl and her white father. But we don't necessarily picture a black family and a black man in the relationship with his daughter, and that is an important thing. And Heather says that it's important not because they didn't show hers, but because they don't really we never get to see that. And so also the impact of the show on youth is obvious. Like, this, if they do depict that, then young black girls might have a different opinion of themselves when it comes to how they relate to men or their fathers or whoever. To that same effect, the producers told a story. Norm asks about the bi label and talked about, I guess they all talked about how ahead of the time that they were with Norm's sexuality and discussing it and depicting it so openly. I was with my girlfriend yesterday, and we were trying to figure out what was the first gay kiss on television, on American television. What year was it? What show was it? And we were surprised to find out that the first gay kiss really didn't happen until the late 90s, like 1999, I think, on American television. And scripted television and like mainstream TV. There's lots of different. I mean, by that time there's like 200 channels. We weren't looking at every one, but the ones that are most noted and the most popular, like when I say mainstream. But Norm's kiss was in 1992 on The Real World of him and Charles Perez. That was 8 years earlier, right? And so 7 or 8 years earlier, and so they were very much ahead of their time. And the point that one of the producers made is that a young 16-year-old gay kid came into the casting office of The Real World in Europe, so like still 20 years ago, to thank them for Norm and for Pedro. And that's, I guess that's when this producer said, it was actually John Murray, the co-creator, who said that, we knew that this was something that was ahead of its time. And what do you think about the impact of that? Did you react to that?
Yeah, that was impactful for me. The fact that someone would wait in such a long line just to say, thank you, for a 16-year-old to do that. So, but I don't really remember. Maybe it was also because that Norm was kind of sort of depicted as a bisexual on the show, and also that I didn't really feel a huge amount of comfort between Norm and the person that he was like snuggling up with when he was at the gay pride rally on the show. So it didn't really have like a huge impact on me as much as, let's say, I feel like around the same year when Madonna dropped Truth or Dare, and I know that wasn't a TV show, that was a movie, but there was that gay passionate sexual kiss that happened between Gabriel.
That was 2 years ago. That was 1990.
Right. So, and I feel like that had much more of an impact with me, and I can see how that affected my artistic and professional life too, just because that was the kiss that I wanted to have, not because it was like they were necessarily in love. I mean, they could have been, they were dating, but it was also just like a sexy kiss, with tongue that went on for like over 20 seconds. And that's the kind of thing that was shoved in my face with straight people, kissing all the time, whether it was on television or movies or sex scenes and movies and everything like that. So that definitely had an effect on, how I wanted to push boundaries with what I do artistically. But I think that politically in a way to normalize relationships between two gay men. I think that Norm had a hand on that, but probably not as much as I wanted it to be. Like, I think that Pedro pushed it a lot further than Norm did, but a lot of that had to do with just
Pedro, there could. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it just what I just want to finish off and say that it wasn't like it didn't seem like a real relationship. Like, it seemed like the first time I met them was the first time they were snuggling, and I don't ever remember seeing the guy that Norm snuggled up with again. And I know that you had broken down the history of that guy and how he had a show and he denied his gayness too. So there seemed to be a lot of iffy factors that didn't just come together and like wow me.
I'm not really. I don't want to go down the path of like qualifying if this was a valid relationship. I'm just saying having an out queer person living his normal life was impactful. Madonna was way more impactful, but Madonna, Truth or Dare, was an NC-17 movie rating in theaters.
Oh, that's
so
right.
16-year-olds were not able to see that, boo. They had not got to see it's because of that kiss. They were not able to see that, and that kiss actually caused a lot of that kiss and the moment of what was a if you watch the story about the background dancers was a really big point of pain for the dancers who actually did the kiss because they weren't out. One of them wasn't out at the time and then was outed for having HIV in the movie and ended up ending his life. And so and so that was that there's a lot going around that Madonna. It was big, but it was right now. It just looks like a normal thing. You're right, but it was enough to get the movie an NC-17 rating, among other things. 16-year-olds were not watching that movie. 8-year-olds were able to see Norm kissing this guy. 8-year-olds were able to see. I was younger in 1992. I was just younger. I wasn't 17, and so 8-year-olds were able to see. People from all families were able to see this depiction of the real world. It was had way more viewers in its time than Madonna's Truth or Dare did because they restricted it. And so, but you are 100% right. It did do something to normalize. They were kissing. They weren't at a gay pride rally. They were actually at a pro-choice rally. And so
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's how political the show was. Right, a bunch of gays kissing at a pro-choice rally, honey. If they only knew that Lil Nas X was going to come swinging down into hell lap dancing. But it was a very emotional, and you mentioned Pedro, which was obviously like there's no denying Pedro's impact. But I think without Norm, there wouldn't have been a comfort from the producers to cast someone who was out like Pedro 3 years later, right? And so Heather mentioned that back in the 90s, she ruined, there was in an infamous moment, she ruined Kevin and Eric's birthday, joint birthday party because they were having this birthday bash and then she all of a sudden bashed one of their guests in the face and turned into a fist fight where Heather got detained. She didn't get arrested, but she got detained, handcuffed, taken down the street in a police car because a woman tried to snatch a cup of ice out of her hand. This is back when they were charging for cups and ice back in the day, which is I think is pretty cool. My mom used to have parties like that where they would charge at the door like a nickel to get in to all the people. Yeah. I'm talking about this is in the 1960s.
Prohibition.
Well, like 1960s, maybe 1970s, they would charge, whatever to their friends. Anyway, the point is, so Heather decides that she wants to have a surprise birthday party for Julie, complete with 90s music, playlists, and clothing. And it's full 90s extravaganza in the house, which I thought was pretty sweet. I don't know about celebrating my birthday on national television like that, like marking the years, marking the rings around the tree, but Julie, I'm sorry. Anyway, it's the last night in the house, and the roommates are now reflecting on what they learned and what they know. And Norman says that he learned that it's important to not let anyone take up your time and energy. I think he's talking about Becky in this. And Julie mentioned that she learned that some things are just worth letting go of. I also think she's talking about Becky. Or at least that's the impression. So the roommates take one last walk over to Eric's house outside of his apartment, and Eric mentioned how emotional he is that he doesn't get to be in the room with the roommates, and how he's very happy that he did this, and he believes that the bond between the roommates is absolutely unbreakable. Do you have any unbreakable bonds with your roommates, with any roommates that you've ever lived with?
Well, my last two roommates, well, my roommate right now has definitely become my closest friend in Los Angeles. And, you know, we're really tight, and we're both cancers, and, you know, we're always in the same place, like no matter what, like we're always going through the same thing with different, you know, different guys and different relationships and different things with career. And he's also a musician and a DJ. It's Barbo, who's also the producer of Dirty Sanchez and does his own work, and he's a great DJ. And so I've been a great producer, so I've learned a lot from him, and we do projects together, and we started our own thing, Equal Rights for Robots production. So definitely like him. I don't I could even see me like renting like or buying a house with him, you know, like I feel like I could live with him forever. Like it's not a problem. And then my last roommate before that, can you hear me okay?
Well, I guess, are there any, let me reframe this question. Is there anybody that you were close with, that you lived with more than 10, 20 years ago that you're still in contact with now? It's understandable that you're close with who you're living with in the same room. I'm talking about years later.
Okay, well, Michael Wakefield, who lives on 9th Street and Avenue A, and I was just supposed to live there for like 2 weeks, and it turned into about 7 years. And we shared, like, if you're from New York City, then you know what a railroad studio apartment is. It's like you can't get to the bathroom without going through somebody's bedroom like that. So we lived together in a really, like, he still lives there, but we're still friends. And you know, we got along really, really good. You know, we're both water signs, so we could deal with each other pretty well. So that's the only roommate that I think that I've had that I still really talk to or could call up on the phone at any time without any hesitation. So I've been pretty lucky in the roommates and with my roommates.
Yeah, I think I love the relationship that you have with Michael Wakefield, aka Peaches.
Pickles.
I mean, did I say Peaches? I meant to say Pickles. Kevin mentioned that speaking of unbreakable bonds, Kevin mentioned that they are, when they go to visit Eric, they're really elated because they're able to see Eric one last time, but they're also really sad because Eric can't physically be with them, and also that Becky's not there, which is really interesting, that Kevin's expressing a sadness that Becky's not there with them to finish this moment out. And I just think that goes to show sort of the maturity that you talked about with Kevin, and that while they are having these disagreements, those people do have this very true and real unbreakable bond, that even if they all have a fight, this thing still happened with the seven of them. Just then we get to see never before seen footage, there's a lot of that in this season, of the roommates packing to leave the house, and it's sort of a split screen, what's going on then and what's going on today, and pretty much underscoring the fact that while many years have passed, not a lot has changed, especially between the roommates. And Eric is basically saying that each of them, this is so much bigger than each of them, but it exists in all of them, this love that he's talking about, which sounds kind of kumbaya, but it was actually kind of touching, I think. And so what do you think about where the roommates did acknowledge, some of them, that they would never get to do this again? They had all kind of said it in one way or another, that this is pretty much it. And so what do you think about the legacy that they have to leave? You know, I think that this show did bring back, for some, certainly reintroduced or introduced the original seven and the first season of The Real World to a lot of people who just missed it in the past 30 years. But so that being said, what do you think that their legacy will be?
I mean, their legacy is obviously that they're the first, and they're also the first and maybe only ones that are memorable enough to have a 29/30 year reunion get together. So I don't really see them doing that with any other season. I think that I think that it is kind of sad that Becky bounced, but I feel like it is what it is, and that's where they are. Uh, I don't know. This whole thing was like very hard for me to watch in a
You
lot of
mentioned
ways,
that.
but I stuck through it for you.
Well, I'm so glad that you did. Kevin and Andre mentioned that they feel that this time around they actually believe that they learned more about their roommates than they did the first time, which is really
I agree.
interesting. In just a short, obviously a much shorter amount of time.
Right.
And I really found it touching that the show closed with the opening. Okay, actually, one thing that actually happened, going back a little bit, I'm sorry to jump back. There was when we were talking about all of the doors opening, and I'm getting goosebumps now. We were talking about Norm and Pedro, talking about doors opening. Then they have a chance to show, and I thought this was just really sweet. They showed Norm. They showed I think her name was Becky on season 2, the lesbian who wore that shirt that said "I'm not gay, but my girlfriend is." They showed Genesis, they showed Pedro, and then they showed this whole montage of all of the queer people who've ever been on the real world. And it really showed, like, I just thought it was really emotional that they were able to show, like, this is the door that this person opened, and this is what it led to. And I think that was just a nice moment to kind of show that these people in some way, shape, or form were pioneers, or at least were inspirational or influential to certain groups of people, to young people that were watching them at the time. And so I just wanted to say that. But the show this time around, the finale finally ends with the roommates packing to leave. They're grabbing their bags and going out. It's a split screen just like it was in 1992. And the show closes with the opener of the show, but reformatted in the style of the closer of The Breakfast Club, which I think was pretty creative. And so The Breakfast Club, basically, if you don't remember, those who haven't seen it, you should definitely see it, ends with these seven people who are in detention for the weekend, not getting in high school, not getting to do what they want. And the principal is coming down on them, and they're all getting punished. And they're supposed to write a letter, write about why they regret who they are and things like that. And that's the assignment. And the whole movie is about them trying to figure out who they are and their relationships. But it ends with them actually writing a letter to the principal saying that we're not ashamed of who we are. We love who we are. And, so we're going to take these labels that people assign us and we're going to wear them with pride. The athlete, the pretty girl, the geek, the spaz, the nerd, whatever. And so that's how this show closes, with each of them saying, 7 strangers pick to live in a loft and have their lives taped to find out what happens when people stop being polite and start getting real. And that's the closing of the show. And I thought it was well done for what it was. It was a reunion. It could have just been an hour-long special, but I think there's some stuff that happened in this that we wouldn't have gotten to see, or wouldn't have happened if it was just an hour-long special. What did you think of the closing?
I thought it was nice the way that they did it. And I really liked that they did, give a special shine to the queer people that have been on the show. And you kind of forget how groundbreaking it was to be not straight on a show, or to, to be trans or gay or bi or lesbian. So, and I feel like people in the queer community probably needed that show, especially in the early years, more than straight people did. And then it became like, oh, this is how we're going to get straight money. Let's get a hot tub type thing. I also think that one other thing that was like touching to me about this episode that I should probably say is that Kevin, had felt a certain way when Norm told them that because he was gay, he had his head in a toilet. And I felt that he kind of connected to that responsibility as far as, at one point in his life, having a homophobic state of mind, the same way that, a white person could connect to the responsibility he would have had observing or being a part of racism. So not that homophobia and racism is exactly the same thing, but I mean, fucked up is fucked up. And so I kind of feel that in some ways, like, he took ownership for past comments.
He did, and there
say
was
goodbye
that
to
moment.
Ethan.
They both actually did, because there was also a scene where they showed a recap or a previous scene from the 1st season that they showed that that Kevin was upset that Norm took Julie's side in their argument, and he said, you know, you just said that you would probably go testify for Julie in court against me, even knowing that you would never be there. And Norm was like, I would. And so that just goes to show that they both were sort of guilty of prejudging each other and, you know, not giving each other really the benefit of the doubt. And not, they certainly didn't seem to connect in and see eye to eye with their experiences then that the way that they did now. You're right. And so it was great to see Kevin acknowledge that. He brought that back. That's something that Norm had mentioned a couple of episodes ago, and Kevin brought it up again to acknowledge the pain that Norm had gone through. And you're right. I think that was really big of I thought that was beautiful for Kevin. It wasn't big of Kevin. It was beautiful of Kevin to do, because he is actually the only person in the house who acknowledged out of context when they're talking about race or one thing or that. He's the one, Kevin, who would acknowledge this also affects LGBT people. This affects trans people. He has done that like 2 or 3 times in this house, which I thought was pretty cool. Not that many other people would have done that in the house. And so it goes to show that Kevin seems to have a real understanding about empathy, in a really beautiful way. And so, well, the roommates left the house and they locked the door, closed the door on that chapter of their life. But one thing that I think is really interesting is that Heather says, there's something about this group of people, the chemistry that we have, that just always leaves to be continued. And that's what Heather said. That's how the show ended. And then Julie, they showed a video of Julie back in 1992 saying, y'all should just stop the show now and then surprise everybody with a new cast. And they surprised us with 30-something years worth of casts in the way of The Real World, Road Rules, The Challenge, which also just started its new season this week of The Challenge All-Stars. I won't ask you to review it, but I thought it was a beautiful way.
I've seen an episode of it.
Did you? Oh, the one that I sent? Yeah. I'm so glad that you all have watched this with us. I really do hope that those who haven't seen The Real World Season 1, do yourself a favor and go back and watch the original season. It does move at a slower pace than what you would see today. It's not Real Housewives, but there's something very endearing and genuine about that first season. It just feels real. I don't think there's any other way to say it. It's certainly, looking at that season, I could see why people were inspired to create more of them and things like The Real Housewives. And to be honest, you know, if the tables were turned and we got an episode of Real Housewives, I'm not sure how inspiring it would be. I know that feels like a read, but I think it happened the way that it should have. So, Caswell, I love you so much. You're my best friend, and I'm just really happy that you decided to do this with me. Thanks for watching, folks. If you like this, or even if you hated it, please share the video with all your friends and loved ones and your enemies, whatever. Don't forget to click like and subscribe and follow Caswell on his channel, Caswell TV. He also has Caswell Vivo. We're going to do that this time. Until next time, I guess. Caswell, thank you.
Thank you.
Love you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.